Hi, my name's Richard, and this is the Arc Design 7 podcast. Here I have with me Jeffrey Raven, our professor from our topical thesis seminar. Uh,
Hello.
so, for our video today, we're going to be talking about how urban design can push for net zero while also maintaining human comfort. So, first, I want to start with how how have you thought in your line of work, how have you thought of the way buildings and construction can interact with the built environment?
Well, and how much time do we have, Richard? Just
About like 25 minutes, 30
okay.
minutes.
So I was inspired by my background also in as I was growing up, I lived in some very interesting and challenging cities, climate from a climate perspective. I lived in the Middle East and spent a lot of time in East Asia, and I was always interested in why it was that some parts of a city were cooler and more comfortable than other parts of the city. And these are in cities that are, you know, hot, arid cities or hot, humid cities. And in some zones, I lived in Iran, and there was a city that's called Yazd, where there was this kind of emphasis on maximizing uh, ventilation down through these wind towers that cooled courtyards and used thermal mass very effectively. And in East Asia, there were, you know, focus on breezes that were maximized during the summer periods when it was just very, very hot. And so some of the kind of passive cooling and shading techniques were of great interest to me. And I thought about them a lot when I started in my career as an urban designer, um, and worked actually in some of those same parts of the world. I worked quite a bit in the Middle East and East Asia, and South Asia, as well as the United States. And I was fascinated by how to design sustainably, but also from a learning from the kind of microclimate lessons of these places.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that was
interesting.
my yeah, that was my a little bit of the background.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how in the history of human civilization, the early civilizations, they used their environment to support how they live. So what you mentioned in Iran, how they use wind towers, or in Asia where they use larger overhangs. And with the recent developments through industrialization, a lot of that kind of went away for more factories and larger buildings to house more people. And now we're bringing it back. We want, we focus more on the comfort than the efficiency over anything else. Uh, I want to mention how your involvement with the Gowanus project.
Yeah.
How did you come up with the design with your other collaborators, and how did you think about how it should be interact with the community?
Um, So the Gowanus project was an outgrowth of some work I was doing with the Urban Land Institute, which is a big international um, organization that works a lot with the development community. And there was a technical advisory panel that I was involved with around urban heat in relationship to Gowanus. And um, the so I've been working for a number of years with an international consortium of climate scientists called the Urban uh, Climate Change Research Network, UCCRN. Um, and when I um, began working with Urban Land Institute, I described some of the methodology where I was developing with through this consortium. And the roadmap is called the Urban Design Climate Workshop. And it's a kind of a platform, a roadmap for climate scientists and urban designers and architects and the development community to come to around an urban district that's experiencing transformation, rezoning, that kind of thing, which Gowanus was at the time, and to enrich the process through the lens of climate. And so, and to do it in a pragmatic way, to walk in the shoes of the development community and not be necessarily against development, but to do it in such a way that um, it's climate aligned as possible. So to your point on the density question, that it's true that cities are in many cases experiencing migration towards these urban centers globally due to a variety of factors. And these cities have to figure out ways to accommodate greater density at the same time, be sensitive to some of the challenges around climate and equity. And so Gowanus is an example of a city that of a neighborhood in a city which was being rezoned, and the Urban Land Institute then asked me to put together a team along with uh, my design studio, my graduate urban design studio at New York Institute of Technology, School of Architecture and Design, to prototype a climate resilient urban design district, a kind of scenario, a series of scenario models that which I had proposed um, on this topic. So that was around climate adaptation, around urban heat. At the same time, I was also we had just won a National Science Foundation grant uh, where we were essentially working with a consortium of European um, universities and research centers. Uh, and it's through the Belmont grant. So it was a big international grant between the United States and Europe. And uh, in that grant, there were one of the kind of main objectives was on uh, low carbon development prototyping. And so, and in that sort of process were a series of case studies that we were going to study, we were going to use as a basis. So I said to myself, why not bring that to the table with the Urban Land Institute um, work, so that essentially the low carbon development from the Belmont NSF grant would be one side of the coin, and the climate adaptation urban heat island with Urban Land Institute would be the other side of the coin. And to integrate those two together is really fundamental to the work that urban climate scientists have been asking for and kind of focusing on, because really there's been a bifurcation between climate adaptation and climate mitigation. And in reality, those two uh, areas of focus should be as integrated as possible. And so I also was the co-chair of the American Institute of Architects uh, Planning and Urban Design Committee at the time, and I brought the practitioner uh, group to the table around this topic. So we had, like I said, this kind of uh, Gowanus specific urban heat focus with Urban Land Institute and a series of community-based organizations that they'd been working with that then started working with us, which was terrific. The Fifth Avenue Committee and a number of other organizations that were local to Brooklyn. And then this team of international climate scientists through this consortium, and then the European piece of it, where we brought in also some experts from some of the research centers in Europe. And then to top it all off, and this is a kind of a long answer to your very simple question, I'm sure, but is that I approached the Swiss government, who had been working with me on a number of sort of initiatives around climate, and said to them, this is a really good opportunity to help to subsidize this some of the outreach events around this topic. And so we held a series of charrettes, workshops uh, at the Center for Architecture and also in Gowanus, um, thanks to also some of the funding and support from the Swiss government. So the end of it was a publication that was produced by Urban Land Institute, and also a submissions for the Belmont grant that were part of this that was an outgrowth of this Gowanus project. So, part of, the Gowanus piece was, for example, looking at the footprint of the Gowanus district. What was the sort of population in the year 2020, and what was the projected population growth in, say, 2050 through the rezoning, and to then develop a series of scenarios for the current situation in terms of um, energy use, transportation, et cetera, a scenario for future energy use with this larger population in 2050 as a kind of business as usual, and then to sort of imagine a series of strategies that would essentially reduce that carbon footprint to close to zero. And it was through a variety of methods in terms of reducing the energy loads around urban heat, but also, maximizing building envelope strategies to make them as efficient as possible, et cetera. And that, local law 97 these days in New York City is kind of uh, confronting those same types of challenges. So it's definitely anchored in the real world of New York.
So you mentioned how you worked with a lot of different groups and organizations. You always mentioned in our class of how we should consider the stakeholders and who is involved and affected by the project. Uh, have you ever, what was the main concerns of the people who lived in the area, and how were they affected from then and by your project when when it's built?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we have um, put in, kind of put into the design process is an exercise, a kind of module in a way, where when we go to meet and and um, and engage with technical community leaders, community experts, we um, initially don't focus solely on climate. In fact, we really want to focus initially on issues beyond climate, such as uh, kind of key priorities that these communities are facing. I mean, this is in Gowanus. We did a project in Durban, South Africa. We've done projects in Europe, in the United States, and we are essentially want to focus on what are the kind of key issues that the community is facing beyond climate. So, for example, access to services, uh, jobs for young people, um, uh, crime, um, um, issues around getting to jobs, transportation, mobility, that kind of thing. And we sort of develop a kind of methodology where we write down, or we have the community members write on these sticky notes what these key uh, challenges that they're facing are, right? And um, and then what we do is we um, put up a kind of poster. We put these all on sort of on a piece of on a board, let's say, right? All these kind of community priorities, and then we have next to it a poster with urban climate factors, and it's four of them, right? It's four urban climate factors. This is from, climate scientists. It's emerged from engagement with climate scientists that they sort of to, in a way, simplify um, urban climate. But these four factors are related to the function of a city and the form of a city, right? And what we do is then we say, right, now we're going to talk about the community priorities as you see them, and this and climate. And the reason is that we do this exercise of connecting the dots here is that if we come in with you know guns blazing on climate, there's climate change is oftentimes seen as an abstract sort of series of challenges that is important. It's recognized it's important, but it's not necessarily at the day-to-day level that some of these communities are facing, especially communities in need. And for this reason, we, in a way, it keeps us grounded and anchored as climate sort of scientists and climate practitioners to say, how is this work connecting to the lives that are led by community people, people who are in the neighborhoods, who are facing the challenges every day. And so what we do is we take then these sticky notes and we talk through how they relate to one of these four urban climate factors. And sometimes they don't relate to one of these four urban climate factors, but that in and of itself is a useful exercise as well. But the thing is that we've realized is that there are more connections than we think in terms of adaptation and climate mitigation um, to the lives that are led by folks in these neighborhoods around job potential for job creation, around um, the maintenance of infrastructure, the issues around access to services and providing more modes of transportation and mobility to get from point A to point B in the city, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really actually quite exciting to go through that exercise because it becomes much more, let's say, um, clear, not only in the minds of community folks, but in our minds as well. And then that helps to then for us to identify with the community members sort of programmatic priorities that we then, consider in the project that we begin, with community folks. So it helps to really, bring those priorities to the front.
Yeah, it's always good to think in architecture, it doesn't just involve purely the building itself, but always the community, how to bring it together and how it will affect the not just the local area, but the larger context in itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's really interesting because, when we talk about stakeholders, it's a good question. We've talked about it in class, right, Richard? So, we say, well, who are the stakeholders in, a large project like Gowanus or others? But it's yes, the local community, it's the businesses that are using the Gowanus area, it's the kind of larger Brooklyn context, and even the fact that this is such a strategic place in the city, it's the larger kind of city government and kind of city stakeholder groups as well. And that in and of itself becomes very interesting exercise because as you get to larger scales of stakeholders, you start to bring in additional kind of concerns and priorities that enrich the process actually, and to the extent that you can align priorities across multiple stakeholder groups, then that's a terrific opportunity. So we have to kind of walk in the shoes of many different kinds of people with different sort of vantage points and priorities and urgencies.
I think it's about the end of the time. So I want to thank you for joining in on the podcast and informing of your view and your experience to inform everyone watching this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Really a pleasure, and I look forward to continued conversation.